Shalom and welcome to Congregation Ner Tamid's presentation of Israel's music history. Tonight's part 2, 1930 to 1950, the fight for independence, has personal importance. I have a photo of my parents and siblings standing in front of a large tent in 1949 Israel. My childhood in 1950s of a newly independent state of Israel is full of fond memories of its music. I would like to take a moment to thank all the people who worked on this project. Congregation President Charlotte Hyman, Congregation Administrator Adele Schaefer, Vivian Zeeland, Pablo Lebedinsky, Beverly Hasid, Madeline Eaton, Chuck Amital running the Zoom tonight, Mike Burnsweig, Nina Zentner, and of course, Noah Levy. And without further ado, here's Noah Levy.
Thank you and welcome, and I'm very happy you joined us for the second evening. This second part of the lecture is going to be filled with a lot more music and video clips because there has been an advent in the recording industries as the time went on in the 20th century. So I'll do my best to get through as much music as possible. Again, if you have any questions or requests or concerns, please write them in the chat so that I can try to answer everything at the end. You also are welcome to email me later on with any questions or stories. I've had quite a few people writing after the first lecture, and I enjoy learning from you as much as you guys maybe hopefully will learn from me. So without further ado, let's go. We are on, I think last time we ended right before the 40s. And so that's where we'll pick it up from now. Okay, so let's see here. I'll go to present mode. Hopefully we can, hold on just a moment. Okay, wait a minute. So I need your help with a presentation, just a second. Oh, here. Okay, I got it. Okay. I hope that you guys can let me know if you guys can see what I need to first share and then. Okay, sorry about this. And that's why I didn't see it before. It was hiding over here, and here we are. Okay. Can you all see? Thumbs up from everybody. Can you see the presentation? Okay, great. So let me minimize this. Okay. So here we are. We are venturing into the 40s, and this symbolizes, I'm just going to recap where we were. We kind of reviewed almost 50 years of aliyot, of the beginning of music making that was intertwined with what was going on historically. So the themes that we see in the music are the themes that were in people's minds as they were arriving in Israel. So there was a lot of longing and yearning for Israel, and songs that were, or should I say lyrics that were about making an aliyah. And the other theme was work, labor, working the land, building. Those were the two major themes that we saw as far as lyric. And the other big advent that we saw in music is the impressive progression of Hebrew. We saw very early archaic Hebrew kind of being slightly moving into very simple childlike Hebrew, and then starting to evolve again as the modern Hebrew was enriched by the works of the likes that we talked about, Ben Yehuda, even Bialik, the poet. So that was as far as content. And as far as musically, we talked about the roots of the musical landscape that we hear in the music was a lot of what the immigrants were bringing from home. So Western classical music, folk songs from Eastern Europe, Romania, Poland, Russia, and at the same time immersing in the culture of Israel that was basically Arab music and Bedouin songs. So really borrowing a lot from the rhythms and the vocal stylings of the Arab population that was surrounding the new Olim, the new immigrants. We'll see that getting more and more of that. But what I'm interested in seeing this fusion, and that was sort of the last thing that we talked about, where I showed you a clip of Bracha Tzefira and her work with Nahum Nardi. And then we have this combination of a very Western classical composing style and a very Arab Yemenite style of singing. And this fusion is just the beginning of what I call Israeli music. So here we go, and we are in the 40s. In this picture, in the assortment of pictures here, as you see, sort of what was going on at the time, we have the ha'apala. The ha'apala is a term for the illegal immigration that was starting to happen. It substituted the aliyah. Because basically the British government has put limits over the amount of immigrants that were allowed to come to Israel, and the formation of military organization like the Palmach, the Lehi, and the Rak Kach, which you see here in the right. The other thing that I want to show you quickly that you may have not seen footage of before is this Choma u'Migdal. Choma is a wall, and Migdal is a tower. And this is a term that was given to the establishment of quick, small, basically settlements, really. I know this word has a lot of baggage, but those were the early settlements, and they were pretty ad hoc. I will show you a pretty rare video clip that I found of what was it like to start this Choma u'Migdal. This is another Israeli propaganda video. So for those of you paying attention, the song used here in the background is Ya Chaylili, that we mentioned in the first lecture. And we're seeing here the system of Choma u'Migdal, of starting a new settlement. And basically the tower is pre-built. I will kind of rush this forward. They bring over the tower, they set it up. It's a pretty fast work. And then they are doing a little fortress around. And after they're done with setting up the tower, what they do, they dance the hora. So this was basically the spirit of the time, where the rule was that if you had spent more than 24 hours over a piece of land, you can basically claim it as yours. And so the early settlers were sort of adopting this system. They were getting as fast as possible, getting the basics that what they need. The tower is a watchtower, also functioning as a water tower, so that the supply of water, and the wall that's around, that you can maybe see it more clearly in the photo here. The wall around it is another sort of defense. So this era of watch and tower symbolizes this move of songs that were about war and defense. And we will see this persisting more and more, basically for the next 20 years, as the country was more and more ridden with war and fights. This one is probably the most popular Israeli song, except for maybe Yerushalayim Shel Zahav. especially back in the time. You may have heard this. I will play a little version of this, and I will explain a little bit about the lyrics. Okay, I'm sure you've all heard this before. So a quick story about this song is this is a song that basically talks about girls go out and see there are soldiers here in our little town. Do not fear those soldiers. That's what the message of the song. And what is this about? So the relationship with the British soldiers that were the British mandate soldiers at the time was complex. There was on the surface, there was um, a stream of people who were saying we need to get along. Uh, these soldiers, because of what was going on in Europe, because of the Nazi taking over and what was going on in the Second World War, we were cheering for the British soldiers on the outside. But on the inside, on the underground, there was a lot of course, attempts to overthrow the British mandate and take charge over the land of Israel. So there were two two kinds of forces in operation here. So you'll see where there's the other side, the mandate, the songs, the underground, where that we'll see them later on. But this is the more on the surface version of we are getting along with the British soldiers and we're cheering them on. Just a little piece of information. This picture here and the version that we've heard is actually by this is a band called the Springfields, which is actually Dusty Springfield, surprisingly enough, with her two brothers at this strange period in her musical career where she started a folk band with her brothers. And so let's move on from here and we'll talk more about this kind of joining forces with the brigade, with the British brigade. And here we have a very famous figure that it's very important for me to talk about, Hannah Senesh. Perhaps one of the most famous icons of the time. Every child in Israel knows who Hannah Senesh is. She's very much a part of our culture. Um, Definitely for her heroism, but also because she left us a musical legacy. And the story of Hannah Senesh, for those of you who don't know, she is a model of a pioneer. She was born in Hungary, and she came to Israel filled with idealistic aspirations of Zionism and working the land. She moved to a little agricultural settlement near, or a kibbutz near at the time, near Caesarea. And as she was quite a few years after she moved to Israel, she decided to join the Jewish Brigade. The Jewish Brigade was a segment of the British Army of Jewish soldiers that signed on to help the efforts to overthrow or to fight the Nazi regime. And she joined as a paratrooper, which is remarkable. And I've mentioned that before, and I'll mention that again. Women were a very strong force in all aspects of life in the era of the Aliyot and of building the land. They took part in guarding, and they took part in any kind of physical labor. And Chana Senesh is a great example of that. She and quite a few other women were part of a group of 30 Jewish brigade soldiers that signed on a mission to land in Europe and try to infiltrate Hungary to help join then the armed forces and save some of the Jewish communities that were treated very awfully. The story, though, unfortunately, they were waiting for 3 months after landing, and they landed in Croatia and joined the partisan forces, and waited for documents the false documents that they can use to cross the border. They didn't receive these documents, and Chana Senesh decided to cross the border, and she was caught. She was tortured and eventually executed. And after her death, with this specific little piece of paper that you see here on the right, a story came out that this is a little note. She wrote this little poem. It's a 4-line poem. And right before she crossed the border, she gave this to one of her friends. Oops, I lost my presentation. She gave this note to one of her friends telling him, keep this in case I don't return. This is an amazing piece of poetry. And after it was known that she was killed. Her friend that had the note ran and said, oh my God, this is a beautiful piece of work. It cannot be the only thing she's ever written. He went back to her home, asked her sister if she's kept any diaries, and they found her diaries filled with beautiful poetry. If you want to read this, this is a translation that I kind of modified. It's a beautiful translation of that kind of symbolizes what Chana believed. That she was, and she said it in her own words, that she wants to give her life for building and thriving in Israel. And of course, considering her circumstances, this became a very symbolic song. It was composed by David Zehavi, which we'll hear a couple of versions of his songs as well, and became a symbol of the youth movements and the underground warriors at the time. So let's listen to this song. As you can hear, this is a very kind of march-like, pretty militant song composition. The recording that we saw is, of course, a much later recording. There is the earlier version of this is on the playlist that I will send later on. The more famous song that you might have heard before, that by Chana Senesh, is, of course, Eli Eli, or A Walk to Caesarea. I'm not going to play it because I'm sure you've all heard it before. It will be on the playlist. And here is a picture of David Zehavi, who composed both this song and the previous one we've just heard, and quite a lot other songs that we'll hear later on. So David Zehavi is one of the most prominent composers of the time. He was another classic figure of this era. He worked as an electrician, and he was one of the founders of Kibbutz Na'an. Worked and professed labor and love of the land, but also was very musical and had a lot of skills, and he would just gather everyone around and get them singing, and to the point where the members of the kibbutz said, hey, let's all pitch in and get a piano for David so that he can play, which is what happens. And on that piano he composed this song and quite a few others. And David Zehavi said on A Walk to Caesarea that he composed it almost in 5 minutes. It just flew out of him, and in tears he was. And he wrote a letter to Hannah Senech's mom saying that he still thinks that this is one of the most beautiful pieces of poetry that he's read. We will move on. I'm sorry, I know this is beautiful and everybody wants to hear. There's more stuff to hear later on. So Hannah Senech symbolizes this joining along with the British. And we will now move on and see a total other side of Israel at the time. We are still at the 40s, but now we are in Tel Aviv. And it's as if Tel Aviv, same as today, as if Tel Aviv is sort of like a bubble in Israel, developing its own culture, very urban, very bohemian. And as you can see here, these are 4 different photos of people in coffee shops. So Tel Aviv was flourishing with coffee shops at the time. And the thing that all these photos have in common is the presence of Natan Alterman. And Natan Alterman represents, if not more than almost anyone, the Tel Avivian bohemian life of the 40s and the 50s and all throughout until his death. He was a very, very prominent figure in Israeli culture. Natan Alterman, a poet, a publicist, a journalist, political activist, extremely important figure, and we will hear a lot of his words in future songs. But other members of the coffee houses that we see here, that I'll mention in a bit, we have Avraham Shlonsky. We have here on the left the member of the Broom, or Hamatate, which was the early theater group that did a lot of satirical works and translated also works from Brecht and other important political satire theater works. And the spirit in Tel Aviv, it's as if they don't talk a lot at all about working the land or anything like that. They really are trying as hard as possible to create a new modernized lifestyle of the Israeli, of the new Ole, the new person that's kind of disconnected from the old days of the old Russia. The Natan Alterman really rebelled against the classical works of Chernichovsky and Bialik that I've mentioned in the first lecture. They wanted to create something new, and they used the new Hebrew to really upgrade the level of their works, the work being written, to an amazing poetical level. I'll start with showing one song to kind of represent what Tel Aviv was like. This song is a tango. Before I'll play it, I'll say a few words. This is a tango that Alterman wrote because the composer of this song decided, oh, there is way too much hora in Israel. There's way too much of this Balkan or Cherkessi style. We need to create something more elegant, something more salonic. And so she quickly wrote the words for this tango, and Alterman was hanging around in the coffee shop with her and immediately composed the melody for this. And funnily enough, I will play you the performance, and we'll talk a little bit about what we hear.
אל תגידי דבר, היה זה רק לרגע, היה ויעבר. הלילה באתי רק לומר לך, שהכל מותר לך, שלא כואב לי הלב, לי רק חבל ומוסר. אני מפה בשקט אלך, ולא אומר למות בגללך. אני אחשוב רק זאת אומרת, המרמה נגמרת, למה ומדוע ואיך. אם רק רוצה עוד הלילה, רק הלילה זה לזכור ביחד, התאהבנו זה.
Sorry, it's on the playlist. The performer of this tune is Yosef Goland. And what is interesting, I don't know if you were able to really listen carefully, but all the effort and the to really sound elegant, and this is a tango that is supposed to be this Argentinian sexual dance, but the accent of Yosef Goland is pretty obviously of a Yiddish singer. He's really pronouncing things as oily and lama madua, which is only in this kind of setting you will kind of see this fusion of, oh, it doesn't matter that you don't sound the part. Let's mix the two. Yosef Goland was a huge star of the era. He had a lot of hit records later on. And so this is one of the songs of Natan Alterman that kind of represents what they were doing. This song was performed for the first time in Tel Aviv in those Purim festivals that we've discussed last time. And the members of the orchestra that played it were actually academics that couldn't find a job in those early days of Tel Aviv, and they kind of played instruments that they learned as a hobby, but they did that as a living when they moved until they could settle in and find work. And okay, another important member of the Tel Aviv scene, and in fact a founding figure in the Israeli culture, is Leah Goldberg. I cannot stress enough how amazing this woman is. She's a poet, a writer, a literary critic, extremely important. The Wikipedia entry on her is filled with information and articles written about her and movies, and I really highly recommend researching. Leah was born in Prussia. I forgot to mention that Alterman was born in Warsaw. So these are more Eastern European immigrants. And they both moved around the time. Alterman moved to Israel, made an aliyah with his family, but Leah came mostly on her own as an adult. She her mission was to use Hebrew as the language for her art, and she didn't feel she wrote the songs about Israel and the love of the country for sure, but she also wrote a lot of personal material and really used Hebrew in a way that was it's still fresh. Her songs are still over and over, composed over and over today, till this day, because the Hebrew is so relevant and so beautiful, and her uses of metaphors and all sorts of idioms is absolutely beautiful. Let me play. It was very hard for me to choose which songs I will play of Leah Goldberg. Hold on, I'll hold off for a moment. She was, as much of she has a huge volume of work. A lot of it is definitely for adults, but she also was a very famous and celebrated children's books author, and wrote a lot of children's songs. This is one of the more childlike songs that she's written. It's called the Chalil, or the flute. And she wrote this 3 years after she made an aliyah. So very fast, she was acclimated and started working with the poets of the time. And the composition of this song is this same guy that we have seen before, David Zehavi, that composed Chana Senesch's work. And I'll say one more thing about David Zehavi that will illuminate what we're about to hear. David grew up in Yafo. He made an aliyah. He was actually one of those early Israelis that were born, the first Sabas. His family made an aliyah, and he was born in Israel, and they lived in Jaffa. He said that his childhood was filled with a blending of his father's Shabbat chanting and singing Jewish songs or Yiddish songs, and as well as those coffee shops and coffee houses of and the Arab music that was around in Jaffa. And I think this is a great example of maybe what he was able to, how he was able to combine the two in his work. You will hear this, the words by Leah Goldberg, absolutely Hebrew, and the composition is by David Zehavi, and the performance that I chose of this song is by Hadassah Sigalov. And you will hear in her singing the kind of blending that I'm talking about. The flute.
הוא פשוט ועדין בקולו כמו קול של הלב, החליל כשכשוך הפלגים, כמו שיר ילדים, כמשק הרוחות בפרדס מלבלב, החליל, החליל, מנגינת החליל, לאילן לענן, מנגינת החליל, למרבץ עדרים, מנגינת החליל, לאחי הקטן, מנגינת החליל, להרים להרים, החליל.
Yes, Hadassah Sigalov, and I think you can perhaps tell she is from Yemen, and you can hear how she takes this composition and really subtly infuses it with her interpretation of it. And what we have is this blending of a kind of a Western classical piano, very interesting harmonies there in the background, and her beautiful interpretation. And you can hear her ha and her ayin that she is emphasizing. I'll play a little bit of just one other song of Leah Goldberg. Again, highly recommend researching more of her works. You can write to me and I can recommend. There's a very excellent movie about her, and there's a lot of albums, collections. And the song that I chose is a composition by Yehudit Ravitz, which we will meet in depth later on as we progress in time. But this song is it belongs to the Israeli music pantheon, and you will hear a little bit of it. And what I want you to pay attention is the fact that everybody's singing along. And this is a beautiful song that's called Slichot, Forgivenesses. Here we go, Yehudit Ravitz. I will translate quickly the lyrics so that you can understand how beautiful the words are. Bata elai et einai liftoach. You came to me to open my eyes. Vegufcha li mabat vechalon urei. And your body to me is a look, a window, and a mirror. You came to me like the night that comes to the owl, to show it in the darkness, all of the things. So as you can see, this is just the first verse. Beautiful, beautiful lyrics. And this is, of course, a masterful composition. Leah Goldberg. Moving on in our time. Sorry. Oh, here we go. Now we are changing the mood and going back to talk about the British soldiers and the other perspective. So there was the Jewish brigade and Tsena of look and be friendly with the soldiers, but there was absolutely the underground movement that was rebelling against the mandate. And famously, the famous organization was the Palmach. Plugot Machatz is an acronym that basically means strike forces. And we will hear the anthem, I would say, of the Palmach. And I will say one thing about the lyrics here. You can see here on the left is the English translation. And it says, every man in combat ready, or to combat is ready, and every man is on guard. Kol bachur vatov laneshek, kol bachur al hamishmar. In fact, as I've said, the women were so much involved in the Palmach that they rebelled against nothing but men being mentioned here. And so the lyrics were changed. Kol bachur vatov laneshek, bachura al hamishmar. The girl is on guard. Every woman is on guard. The music is again our friend David Zehavi, and let's hear a little bit the spirit of the underground. Oh, sorry. That was not intentional. One more time. Sorry. Here we go.
כל בחור וטוב לנשק, כל בחור על המשמר, נתיב לנשר בשמיים, שביל לפר בין הרים, מול אויב דרכנו יען, בין נקרות ובין צורים, ראשונים תמיד אנחנו, לאור היום ובמחשך, לפקודת תמיד אנחנו, תמיד אנו הפלמ"ח.
Okay, this is the end, the Shir Hal Palmach, the song of the Palmach, and that really.
A Levy thing. Can
Yeah.
I call you when it's done? Okay, it's only an hour.
Oops, I'm sorry. I thought I was having a problem here. Okay, so that actually transitions us really well with the woman that sang the song is we'll see her a lot more of her in just a bit, but we are now moving along in time to the establishment of Israel, and I will not go in so much into the history because I'm sure you've heard it millions of times. But the woman who was singing the song, and this is some photos from the War of Independence, and I will talk about the music that was accompanying the time. So the content of the songs is almost completely departing from those early days of work, and all the emphasis is being put on war, defense, being ready, standing guard, really trying to motivate soldiers. The music that transitions its functions into motivation, into and battle. And so here is she was called Yafa Yarkoni, the woman that sang the anthem of the Palmach, and she was known as really the singer of the wars because she was so much emblematic of that time period. Yafa Yarkoni has a very interesting life story, and in fact, her life story also symbolizes the spirit of the time. She's actually she was born in Caucasus, which in Hebrew is called Kavkaz. She was one of the mountain Jews of this is the area around Azerbaijan. And she moved with her family when she was a child to Tel Aviv. Then later on, her dad left the family, and she was left alone with her mom and her sisters. And her mom opened, what do you know, another coffee shop in the area, right, Givatayim, right outside of Tel Aviv. And Yafa, along with her sister, starting singing in her mom's coffee shop, and they caught a lot of attention. However, she also, as she got older, she married. She got married, and her husband was joined the famous Jewish brigade that we had mentioned before, and died in battle. And so she became quite a young widow. She later joined the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. She became a soldier in the War of Independence, and she served as a what do you call it's called an al-khuta'it. She was carrying a radio, and she was kind of managing a communication for the certain brigade she was walking along with, and her skills as a singer, and she was also actually trained as a dancer, and she was a kid, became pretty obvious. And then she transitioned from her position as kind of like in charge of a radio, and then she joined a band, an army band that we'll talk a lot more about later. And she really got a lot of recognition and became very, very famous, and got married again. And really what it was her life's mission. She basically sang to the soldiers. She spent years traveling and singing in battle posts and in Besisim, in all sorts of events and that were organized for soldiers throughout in wartime, in between war times. And I want to show a few songs that really represent the spirit of the time. As you can see, she was very beautiful, and very kind of, she had always this short hair, kind of very elegant, and she sang both sang that those tangos and those Solonic songs, and represent the kind of the spirit of Tel Aviv. But she was more well known. She felt more at home with the songs that represent the War of Independence. And this record that you see here on the right, Bab El Wad, is an album, one of her most famous album, that if you are interested in is kind of Israeli music, this is an iconic album. It really collects a lot of the most famous songs of the time. A lot of them talk about the War of Independence. So we'll start with the title track of that album is Bab El Wad. Bab El Wad is the wadi leading towards Jerusalem. And this is a story that Chaim Guri, the poet that wrote this song, wrote about the brigade that was basically escorting there was the tanks that were going up to Jerusalem, and then there was the troops that were escorting those tanks, and they suffered the most losses because they were basically the most exposed. And this song is dedicated to those troops. And let's hear it. And this is the early recording of the song, the original version.
כביש אספלט שחור, סלעים ורכסים, ערב ואת יורד, רוח ים נושבת, אור כוכב ראשון, מעבר בית מחסים, בא בלבד, לנצח זכור נא את שמותינו, שיירות פרצו בדרך אל העיר, בצידי הדרך מוטלים מתינו, שלד הברזל שותה כמו ראי. בא בלבד לנצח זכור נא את שמותינו, בא בלבד בדרך אל העיר, ואני הולך עובר כאן חרש חרש, ואני זוכר אותם אחד אחד, כאן לחמנו יחד על צוקים ותרש, כאן היינו יחד משפחה אחת. בא בלבד לנצח זכור נא את שמותינו, שיירות פרצו בדרך אל העיר, בצידי הדרך מוטלים מתינו, שלד הברזל שותה כמו ראי.
I have to stop. Sorry. a couple of things to say about this very important song. Again, this is one of those songs that everybody will join the chorus, usually crying. The lyrics are so strong, very evocative, sorry. Here we have a couple of themes that start to show that made a big impact on the spirit, the spirit of the time: brotherhood, camaraderie, being all one family. This is basically what kept people together. When you go into the battle, there you rely on one another, and this feeling of I've got my life in your hands really created a bond between the soldiers that is incredibly strong. The other thing that's interesting is, of course, Bab el Wad is the Arabic name for that area that we see here in the photo, that is now known as Sha'ar Hagai, the gate of the valley. But the composer chose to use the Arabic name because that was what everybody was using, including those troops. It was the code name and what they used in planning all the attacks on Jerusalem. And so we have an Arab title, which is surprising for a war song, where we would think that they would not want to have any representation of anything Arab. So that's the other thing that we should know here, that like it or not, it's a huge part of our culture. Even the name is very common and used, and to the fact that they combine it with this song. And of course, the other thing is that we see here as a theme is remembrance. This idea that this song helps to serve as a living memoir of the people that gave their lives in those battles. And so music became a vehicle to tell the tales and keep them in our memories. And it was also a way for people to really channel a lot of the grief and pain that was accompanying the time. We'll move on. Sorry, I'll just have to show you this slide. Oops, I'm going backwards or forwards. Hold on. Here we go. This is one of the other famous songs that, I don't know why it jumps like that. This is Shir HaFinjan. I don't know if you have heard this. I will sing it because my slide is jumping. I don't know why. הרוח נושבת קרירה, נוסיף עוד קיסם למדורה. I'm sure you've heard this. Goes la 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 נושב לו פינג'אן. This was another one of those palmachnik and independence war songs that is talking about sitting around the fire and singing when the wind is blowing. And this is also kind of like the spirit of the time. And I wanted to show you that this song is actually an Armenian song. And here's the Armenian version. I hope you could hear the the background of the Israeli version. I have the Israeli version in the in the playlist, but this is sort of another way to talk about how there's this pastiche that we talked a lot about in the first lecture. So taking existing compositions, but using Hebrew and describing Israeli situations sitting around the fire and basically making them a little bit more Israeli. As you can see, the original Armenian version has a much different feel to it. So we move on with another. Oops, this is not what I. Okay, so with here we have. Here we go. Another. One of the Yafa Yarkoni is one of the symbols of the 50s, and right next to her is Shoshana Damari. They were both legendary figures, very much respected and celebrated as part of the Israeli culture. And Shoshana Damari is originally from Yemen. She also made an aliyah with her family as a kid. In fact, they had a very long journey from Yemen to Israel. And she, as a kid, used to accompany her mom in festivities that the Yemenite community did. She lived in Rishon LeZion, which is one of the first earliest settlements. And she really caught a lot of attention for her performance style and her vocal qualities. And she later on joined the theater with a figure I had mentioned before, Natan Alterman. I don't know if you remember, we saw this the theater group. And so Shoshana Damari joined a second theater group that Alterman was very much involved with. And she made a huge impact on Alterman and on this person that we see here on the left, right here, Moshe Vilensky. Moshe Vilensky fell in love platonically, of course, with Shoshana Damari's skills, and she with his compositional talent and genius, and they worked together throughout her whole career. He would accompany her in all of her performances, and she composed many of her songs. And as you can see, this is an example of this musical marriage of two different musical cultures. Moshe Vilensky is absolutely a European style composer, and Shoshana Damari outwardly celebrating her Yemenite tradition. And let's see a lot of examples, by the way, here on the right. I don't know if you could see this nice little picture on the beach. This is Shoshana Damari and Moshe Vilensky. And on the left is our friend from before, Yosef Goland, the guy who sang in Yiddish accent tango for Tel Aviv. So they're all basically touring the United States in 1949. And as you can see, Damari and Vilensky were very close friends. Let's hear, first we'll hear one of our most famous tunes. This is called Kalaniot. Kalaniot was written by Natan Alterman and composed by Moshe Vilensky. Let's hear and see Shoshana Damari.
שקיעה בהר יוקדת, אני חולמת ברות עיניי, הגיא נערה קטנה יורדת, ובאש כלניות לוהט הגיא, את הפרחים לצרור ייתן לקטרה, ובשבילים המתכסים בטל,
Sorry, I'll have to stop this one. Kalaniot are red poppies, the flowers. And quite a few things to say about Shoshana Damari that are pretty obvious here. First, she was very well known for her all her jewelries and ornamentations that she made a point of wearing in her performances, as well as beautiful dresses and gowns. You'll see quite a few more of those later on in the other examples. You can also hear that she is really emphasizing her accent. The damot and the ha and the ain, that she is really making them being very proud about it. And later, or even during the time, the tensions between the let's say Ashkenazi and the Mizrahi / Sephardic were starting to get a little bit more obvious, and this concept of the ha and the whether or not one should pronounce them or not pronounce them. What is Israeli? Should the new Israeli really get rid of all of his ethnic kind of nuances? Should it be very clean, and who decides what would be clean? What is the Israeli? Perhaps the ha and the are Israeli just as well as avoiding them. And so Shoshana Damari definitely sings them out, as well as all the melismas and the nuances of the Arabic vocal stylings, or in this case Yemenite, North African. Let's see a few examples. So this song, the Red Poppies, there's a rumor, I don't know if it's necessarily true, that this was actually written before the War of Independence, at the time of the 40s, that I showed you all the pictures of the coffee houses in Tel Aviv. And those red poppies, allegedly, this is an insinuation for the British soldiers that were wearing those red berets. And so the British soldiers took offense at this song because red poppies obviously have a black center, and allegedly the British soldiers have a black heart. There's nothing of the sort in the actual lyrics, but this is a story that goes, and I don't know if it's true. A couple of other important songs that we should see here. Let's see an example of song written for Shoshana called Miriam Bat Nisim, that kind of celebrates more of her tradition. Whoop. כרם התימנים.
זה היה בעבר לפני רוח התימן בליל מחר. התפללנו את תפילת הדרך ויצאנו כל המשפחה. את כפית הפטר נצררנו ושאבנו מים מן הבאר. ובשורה כולנו הסתדרנו ובדרך זה את ספרנו. עם כולנו יש ומי חסר. מחזר יש אבא מורי ניסים ירחם השם ויש ניסים האם ירחם השם ויש נחמיה גדליה זכריה ועזניה סלם סעדיה מיכאל חנניה יחיה רוחם ורחמים ברוך השם תאומים והתינוק שלום הצוחק בחלום והניח אותו מרים והחמור הקטן בלעם, החמור הקטן בלעם.
Okay, Miriam Bat Nisim. This is all the footage is from Kerem HaTeimanim, which is kind of a famous, well-known Yemenite community in Tel Aviv, in the south of Tel Aviv, where very close to the Carmel market, and the lyrics of the song is really kind of descriptive of the Yemenite community. She's kind of naming a lot of the different kinds of names, and this guy is the brother of that guy, and it's very fun. And this was another kind of a hit for the time. She people loved it when she sang it live, and This was a great celebration of Yemenite culture and tradition. I think we'll have to move on from here. I will share all of the songs are in the playlist. You can listen. There are quite a few examples, but I do want to highlight another classic War of Independence song that is showing us a kind of another very important theme when we talk about the how was music representing the history and the mood, the spirit of the people. This song is called Hen Efshar. The lyrics were written by Chaim Chefer, which I will talk about in a bit. The music was by David Zehavi, yet again, our friend David Zehavi from before. Hen Efshar is, it's a little bit tricky to translate to English, but hen is another word for can. Efshar is possible. So this is a sort of somewhat of a statement. Yes, it will be possible. Let's hear it. Whoops, here we go.
השלכת נושב כבר הסתר, האבק בדרכים עד שקע, והיום רק אלייך נשרף, וחולם על פגישה רחוקה. הן אפשר כי עוד ערב יבוא, והשער יחרוק לו דומם, ועינייך יהיו כה טובות, כמו אין מלחמה בעולם. הן אפשר, שיהיה זה פשוט כבר מחר, הן אפשר ובג'יפ שעבר, שאגו בחורים כי נגמר. הן אפשר, שיהיה זה פשוט כבר מחר.
It's very tough to stop things in the middle. What can I say? This is another very classic song of the time, kind of similar in its importance to Bab El Wad, which we've heard before, but presenting a sort of a different feeling, which accompanied the same as the grief and the more mourning and music serving as a vehicle for remembrance. This song is about providing hope. It's about pulling through and starting this huge wish for the war to be over. This is the first kind of insinuation of this and another song by Yafa Yarkoni, which we will hear in a bit, where we're starting to, if in the 40s we heard kind of maybe even celebrating the going to battle and militants and soldiers, here after having experienced 2 years of very difficult war, we also hear this kind of notion of we are wishing for better days where the war doesn't exist. Beautiful musically, what we see here is a beautiful waltz feeling dream-like, to sort of insinuate this wish for a better future. But you can almost you would expect that there would be some operatic sound to it. If you think about the early waltzes of the Danube, you think something very classical. And here you have this beautiful, powerful voice of Shoshana Damari, completely blending beautifully into the orchestration, which is to me an Israeli sound. You really don't hear that fusion anywhere else. Of course, today and in the modern world, fusion is definitely celebrated but for that time to really fuse the different stylings, that became a symbol of Israeliness. Okay, so Hen Efshar, a very important song. Oops, all right, and we'll move on to a probably those are the trio. If we have Bab El Wad, you can't really sing Bab El Wad without mentioning this song, Hareut, the camaraderie. Hareut is another song that was it was actually released a year after the War of Independence was over. Sort of the aftermath of what happened. I'll try to play this song in its full. It's in entirety because really it's very symbolic and very important in our culture. Chaim Guri, who also wrote the words for Bab El Wad, celebrated poet, and the music to the song is by Sasha Argov, who is another one of our most celebrated composers. And you'll hear this is an exceptional composition. This performance that I chose to show you is by Lehakat Hanachal. And just in a bit, I will talk more about those bands that I mentioned Yafa Yolkoni being a part of. And now you will see Lehakat Hanachal, which is a band, an army band, performing the Shir Hareut, the song of camaraderie. Yes, Hareut, song of camaraderie. In fact, this song is so celebrated that Reut became a name of a girl in Israel, camaraderie. And some things that we can point out, as for the lyrics, really beautiful poetry. I mean, if you think about only 40 years ago, there was no word for gun, then, you know, there is definitely the Hebrew here is beautiful, modern, and the uses of all the poetic devices is really astounding. I want to highlight that the translation here says for a love that in battle is forged. In fact, the Hebrew lyrics is love made holy by blood. There is we'll see that the uses of religion and biblical references is very much present in the Israeli songbook, and this is sort of an example. Mekudeshet is also what we say in a marriage. Harei at mekudeshet li. So definitely Chaim Guri is alluding to this marriage between love and blood here in war and in this spirit of camaraderie. This is, of course, a song that its theme is of remembrance. And the other thing that we can note here is in this specific performance, I don't know if you have heard, but there is a guitar that has a very kind of a high-pitched sound. This is a bouzouki. A bouzouki is a Greek instrument or specifically dominant in Greek music. And this is another example of fusion of culture. Here we have a very classical, this is a very, the harmonies and the choir are definitely classical influence. And then we have in the arrangement, in the orchestration, we have this bouzouki sound hanging over it to remind us sort of where we are. We're in the Middle East here. Okay, so here we are. This is the camaraderie, the Reut. Very important song. In Israel, we have the Memorial Day, Yom HaZikaron, and either one of these songs that I've just played for you will usually be played and sung, and so they're still very much important in our tradition today. So let's talk a little bit before we have to finish. The time's running away today, about these army bands. So Chaim Hefer, which we've mentioned before as the lyricist to Yafa Yarkoni's song, and he was a member of the Palmach. So this is back in the early 40s. Palmach was established in 1941, and he read a book about Mao Zedong, and about the fact that there was a band that accompanied the Chinese army in their conquests. And Chaim Hefer was very much impressed by that book, and he decided that that's a great idea, and that they should that there should be a band that belongs to the Palmach that will help kind of spread the message of the time, the ideals. The book that he read, of course, that band was singing about communism and the communist ideology. Chaim Hefer wanted to emphasize the spirit of the Palmach, and he started the band here on the left. This is one of the early pictures. It was called the Cheese Batron. And here's another great example of Israeliness. This is a word that was basically made of fusion of two words. Chizbat is originally is an Arabic word for lies, and tron is the ending of that word teatron. And so this is basically a theater that tells lies, the Chizbatron. The tradition of the Chizbat is actually telling a tale around the fire that is false. And back in the time, it was usually around heroic tales about members of the Palmach. And in the Arabic tradition, there's also a lot of trying to scare the young kids, telling them a scary story after night falls. So a lot of the works of the Cheese Batron were comical, were satiricals. They became a huge hit. So they would do programs, and every program would have thousands of people coming to see. They would also tour around the country, performing to soldiers, but also to civilians. And they also recorded their programs so that people can hear it, or they would play it on the radio. So the songs became hits. So let's see a quick example of the styles of the Cheese Batron. All of the songs are talking about army life. Here we are, the jeeps, the campfire.
הפגישה שכזאת, זה רק פעם בשניים דורות, מה נשמע מורה הרב, זה לא ראינו מזמן, כי תמיד כשפלמחניק נפגש עם חבר יחרבטן. בלב משהו מתעורר והומם מבפנים, ושיחה בתחילה על אותם עניינים.
מה יוסף, אתה זוכר שהיינו בפלמח, היה שם מין תותח.
יד לפה הזכרתיך, יד לפה שמור פיך.
אסור לספר על תנועות יחידה, ואפילו תצא עם אחת יחידה.
ציפ 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 ציפי ציפי, לדבר על עינת תוסיפי. כשהפיפול עובר את כל הארץ מסתפררת מכוחה ועד ירדן שמביא אותו משגע. ציפ 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 ציפי ציפי.
ציפ 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 ציפ, הג'י איזה לילה מסביב. שנה איתי לא יש רינה, קח את שמאלה, קח ימינה, כל אחד לא יגיד, העיקר בג'י זה ספיר, חיש כרוח נעבור, נהג עצור, תפיל לשמה, עצור לרגע, פשוט צריכים מהר לעצור, וקצת קשה לרוץ ברגל, החופש כאן, נצא לדרך, הקטע כמו חול.
Sorry, I'll have to. There's no good point to stop. I do want to say a few songs. So this is another. This is a remake of the Cheese Batron, because we don't have an actual footage of the actual Cheese Batron, but this is the spirit of how they would perform. So as you can see, this is completely choreographed. The choreographer's name is Naomi Polani. You could see them rehearsing here at the bottom. And in fact, Chaim Hefer, the lyricist and composer, mostly lyricist of these, of these songs, he was the commander of the band. So very interesting relationship there between the commander and the soldiers. As you can see, the accordion here is a very important instrument, and this is a kind of also influences the style. But I don't know if you manage, I don't know how many of you speak Hebrew or understand, but the words here are nothing like what we saw here in the lyrics of Chaim Guri and Natan Alterman, and Leah Goldberg even, that this was poetry. Chaim Hefer wrote down-to-earth lyrics, and from those lyrics we could really see how people were talking at the time, and we start to see a lot of the Arabic that's part of the Israeli slang. So we had Ahlan and we had Dechillak that they were singing there, and the stories tell kind of like what is a palmachnik do when he sees another palmachnik, and when we add the ik to things, it's usually a terms of endearment, or that you are coming from a certain place. So if you belong to the Palmach, you're a Palmachnik. If you belong to the kibbutz, you're a kibbutznik. So the Cheese Batron were the first army band, and Yafa Yarkoni that I mentioned before was a member of the Cheese Batron. And later, when the IDF was formed, they decided to keep this idea since they were so successful and became such a big part of what was the top 40 of the time. They decided to have to keep the idea of army bands inside the IDF, and every sector of the IDF had its own army band. This is where enters Lehakat HaNachal, who almost dominated the charts for at least 20 years. Almost every song that they had, every iteration, so every draft, because the soldiers only serve for 2 to 3 years, 2 for girls, 3 to the guys, and so every 3 years there was a new troops of singers, and they all became superstars. So if you managed to audition into the Lehakat HaNachal, your road to stardom was almost guaranteed. Now I'll end, I was hoping to venture into the 50s, but I don't think we'll have time. But it does mean that we'll end on a very happy note, because you'll see how clever the songs of Lehakat HaNachal were when we're not talking about the war songs. So this is more popular culture, tales of life in the army, and also just life of what's going on in Israel at the time. We'll see. I'll do 2 clips if you'll allow me to have another extra 2 minutes of overtime. So here is Od lo achalnu. We haven't eaten yet. Relates.
אבל מי שאמר ואמר היו איתו, וכולכם שהצבא שוקל על קיבתו, ידוע שאנחנו מוכנים לכל פקודה, אבל זה התנאי שלנו לא לפני הסעודה. אנחנו עוד לא אכלנו שום דבר, ושום דבר לא שתינו, אם אין שמפן ואין קוויאר, כולנו לחם וזיתים.
So the lyrics of the chorus is, we haven't eaten, we haven't drank anything. If there's no champagne and caviar, just give us some bread and some olives. This is, of course, emblematic of the austerity and this great rationing that was going on at the time, which we'll talk about next time. But as you see, the atmosphere is very comical, and this is already a clip of the first television broadcasting was starting at the time. And we'll see another example of a very famous song by Lehakat HaNachal called Dina Barzilai. I'll tell you the tale of the song beforehand. Dina Barzilai, so the guys in the band are singing about being in the office and being really bored, and they have to file a lot of files. And all of a sudden they see this number, and they're trying to find out there's this new girl, and they all fall in love with this new girl, and they're trying to find her ID number. This is when you sign on to the army, you get like a number. It's sort of like everybody knows their army number even until they are like very old. It's sort of like your other identification number. And so they have her, it's called a personal number, mispar ishi. And so the lyrics of the song are basically her number and them imagining what she may look like. And FYI, the song that we saw before, Od lo achalnu, basically what they're doing is what they call in the army a toranut mitbach. So everybody hates being assigned to the kitchen and do your kitchen duty, where you have to just clean all the dishes and all the huge pots that they have there. I can tell from personal experience that this is the job that nobody looks forward to. I mean, the next awful thing is the toilet duty. So here we have Dina Barzilai, and then I'll leave time for questions.
סגן גד רפאלי הלך לאכול צהריים, ואנחנו שלושתנו נשארנו לבד במשרד.
They're all in the office alone.
ערימות של תיקים,
Tons of files.
דיברנו על פני ילדותי השירות, כן אנחנו היטב מכירים את כולם.
We know everyone here.
בילדות השירות. מכירים את כולם,
We know
מכירים את
everyone
כולם.
by their numbers.
מכל ילדותי השירות הגענו
Of all the
לליבנו
numbers,
רגע.
there's only one that touched our hearts. Dina.
דינה ברזילי,
4, 9, 6, 3, 5, 1. Color of the eyes, blue. Maroon hair. She's 5'3", etc. So they're basically describing what they see in the file of her personal details, and then they can get the idea. Okay, I've ran over. I'm so sorry. Next week, we will start looking into the 50s, and hopefully we'll go 50s, 60s, and 70s. Let me just stop my share and ask if you guys have any questions, and also look at the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself if you want to say anything out loud. I see. Send us how we can find the film about Leah Goldberg. Yes, for sure. I will do that in the email where I send the playlist. I will also send the information about the movie, Leah Goldberg, how to get the playlist. I believe you will get an email. Everybody that signed up to the lecture series will get a group email with the playlist. I will make a note to include information about that movie. Yes, עוד לא אכלנו. Hey, Alan. עוד לא אכלנו was written by Naomi Shemer. Didn't they get into trouble for doing a song like Dina? Sexist song. Well, there's a great discussion about how we view things differently over time. No, they didn't get into trouble at the time. At the time, this was considered funny and cute. There was no any kind of commotion about the lyrics talking basically about a woman. It's also, there's no sexual insinuation. It's just them being guys and kind of imagining a woman. Yes, they're giving her personal details, but it's just facts, and they're not, it's not about she's so sexy or she's so curvy. It's not, it's really just they're trying to read off the facts of her description. For all we know, they don't say anything about her being beautiful, because that's not anything that was in the personal file. So, you know, for all we know, Dina could have been not very attractive in real life. Okay, there was no Israel until 1948. Chana Senesh was in Palestine, not Israel. Yes, that is true. If it's, I usually may have said Israel when I was referring to pre-Israel establishment period. When I have probably, you're talking about Esti, you're probably talking about when I said she made an aliyah to Israel. Well, she made an aliyah technically to Palestine. Yeah, she didn't have a lot of time in Palestine. She really spent just a few years, Chana Senesh, there, and she was executed in Hungary. I have this Shoshana Damari on song on Ancient Technology record album. Oh, wow, Dale, that's great. That's great. If you can share a picture of that with me, that would be great. I would love to see that. Mandolin, not bouzouki. Yes, though I think in the credits of the arrangement, perhaps I will go back to you to get back to you on that, Todd, on that point. Anything else? Any other questions, thoughts, concerns? please feel free. Again, I apologize. Didn't the Army just stop having a band? No, there are still bands today. I was part of the Navy ensemble, and there are still bands today. The thing that changed is that they got a lot less popular. Nothing like what they were at the time. We'll talk about that shift later. Who were the members of the Gis Patron? There were quite a few, because as I said, every 2 to 3 years the troop cycled, and so definitely Yafa Yarkoni was a very important, famous member of the Gis Patron. I can send you quite a few names, Alan. I'll write this as another note for myself. Again, I tried to play as much music as I can, but there's so much to get through, so I hope this was okay. Feel free to write my email. I'll put my email here in the chat again if you have any questions, complaints. I may make some mistakes. I for sure am not perfect. Sometimes I try to speak fast and could make some errors. Here we go. And this is a lot of material to cover here. So thank you for bearing with me. It's a long time to sit for an hour and a half. Thank you so much. Here's my email. Feel free to write to me. Gila Michaeli with להקת Gila Michaeli? I don't, I will, Esti, if you can write down your email, I will respond in an email about this question. If you can write to me in the chat, or either personal email. Thanks, Jenny. I'm happy you enjoyed it. And I will also make sure to download the chat and see if I missed anything. Just another anecdote, that a lot of people think that Yafa Yarkoni and Shoshana Damari were enemies. Sort of the public or the media liked to insinuate that there was a battle going on between Yafa Yarkoni and Shoshana Damari, because Yafa Yarkoni was more white looking or Ashkenazi looking, even though she was actually Caucasus, which is not necessarily Ashkenazi, but she was perceived as such. And Shoshana Damari was definitely Yemenite Mizrahi. However, you sort of belonged to either the Shoshana Damari troop or the Yafa Yarkoni side, but they were actually great friends, and they collaborated many times on quite a number of performances, and I think on record as well. So if you thought that there was a big animosity between the two, let me debunk that myth. When San was in New Lakat and Nachal 1984. Wow. So we probably met. I've probably, that's great. Thank you so much, everyone. If you have questions, or if you'd like more other things, please let me know. Oh, thanks. I see some people cheering. Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Esti, don't forget to get in touch, and thank you, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye. See you next week. Thank you, Noah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.